Hey girl, what you gonna do tonight? I've got my mama's car keys and you've got a ticket to ride. I'm licensed to ill with a drive to thrill, rockabilly roots and a quarter Jack Daniels.
Hello, and welcome to Your Favorite Flick, a podcast where each week we celebrate a movie that my guest loves. We aren't here to be critics, we're here to be fans. This week, Brad Coffman, engineer, curmudgeon, and lifelong friend, joins me to talk about the classic buddy crime comedy Midnight Run, starring Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin. This is a damn funny movie, and I hope we do that justice, but we find ourselves diving even deeper into characters and themes. This is, at its core, a movie about an unlikely friendship, so who better to discuss it with than one of my oldest friends? Enjoy. All right, Chief. Well, thank you for joining me on the show today. Why don't you tell our audience what movie we're here to talk about?
I'm happy to be here. The movie we're talking about today is Midnight Run, starring Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin.
So let me ask you, before we get into the movie itself, tell us a little bit about your history as a movie fan. Like, what are early movies you remember loving? Who helped get you into movies, etc.?
I would say, like a lot of kids in our generation, my love of movies, my movie adventure started with basically HBO. Showtime, I think, was big when I was growing up. TMC, a couple of movie channels that were available on cable, and the VCR came out when we were growing up. So it was the perfect babysitter.
Did you go to the movies much when you were younger, or was it mostly a home viewing
We would
thing?
go to the movies very rarely. If there was a big movie out, obviously like Star Wars, you're going to Star Wars. I mean, if to not be taken to Star Wars was tantamount to child abuse. Similarly, your birthday, you always, or I remember Indiana Jones was one of the movies we saw.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Last Crusade came out, I think, on my birthday, at least in New Orleans. That was a landmark birthday for me. Me,
yeah.
you, Sahil, and Jim, who will be guests on the show soon. Absolutely.
So did not see a lot of movies growing up in the movie theater, but we enthusiastically would scour, my brother and I would scour the projected or the TV listings and just anxiously await our opportunity to record a movie so that we could watch it over and over again. The movies that we liked, we memorized.
Yeah, it's one thing y'all were even better about than me. Y'all really recorded them and kept the library of movies from a very early age.
Yep, we were fortunate to. I remember the first movie we recorded was Back to the Future. There was a period, I think, when we were too young to, well, I don't know if you were ever too young to go out and party in New Orleans, but and then there were a few years that we would see movies pretty regularly on the weekends, in high school. In the last 10 years, I pretty much rarely go to movies still to this day. Um, no reason in particular, but a movie would have to be pretty good for me to get out, go to a movie theater, and go through all of that. And of course, these days, just turn on your television, and there's thousands of movies, some of them recent releases that are still in theaters, right there for you to have at home. And I'm sorry about that in a way, because you don't get the same experience watching a movie at your house as you do watching it in the theater for a number of reasons. But even if you were to dedicate your time and sit down as if you were in a theater and focus on the movie, it is still just not the same. I miss the experience of going to a movie theater to see a great movie. Seeing it at home is an absolutely functional runner-up. but it's simply not the same. And I remember specifically going to see Midnight Run in the theater with my dad and stepmother when it came out.
Oh,
Um,
you saw this in the theater? I don't think I did. We were like 10 or 11 when this came out, and I'm not sure my parents would have taken me to this one.
my parents had no idea how to raise children, especially when it came to age appropriate movies. I remember seeing Colors in the movie theater. I think that I was 8 or 9. That is not an 8 or 9-year-old movie.
Hey, I hear you. I think that's, I hit the movie theaters more than most people our age, I think, but I think that's a lot where our generation is now. That home theaters are much better than they once were, or even if you don't call it a home theater, just a home TV set. Is a picture we never would have believed even 10, 15 years ago. What was the experience like watching this one? Like, hey, you said you took notes. It sounds like you really zoned in.
I've seen the movie so many times. I do remember it verbatim from start to finish, and it was still nice to watch this, focus on it, and appreciate a lot of things that I remembered, but I just did not appreciate. And we'll dig into some of those later in the episode. But for example, his watch. I, you know, it's such a clear symbol or clear talisman of his failed relationship and kind of his, I don't want to say failed life, but failed life. And at the end of the movie, when he gives it to Charles Grodin, I think that what I didn't pick up on ever is this is his fresh start, not just with the money, but this is his fresh start with his life and his relationships. And that's not something I ever really put together. I mean, this is a great way to start your day. I might start watching more movies, but if they're going to be movies that I've already watched that I love because I'm like that. But this was a fine way to start a day. I woke up and got this on the TV and yeah, just watched it and just enjoyed it.
I'll tell you one thing I'm loving about doing this podcast already, and this is about the sixth episode I'm recording. Don't know exactly where it'll come out in the run order because I'm playing with that as I go. We got to get some movies that people actually know, and then some that are obscure, and kind of mix them in. But I will tell you one thing that I'm loving is when I watch a new movie, which I do more than you, I do really try to zone in and like turn off my phone. But with movies I've seen 100 times, I rarely do that. So I've probably watched this movie 5 times in the last 5 years. It's one that I probably put on once a year. But when I say
Mhm.
watched, I've been second screening, I've been fooling around on my computer, sending emails, playing chess, whatever it might be. And so this is the first time in a long time I've really like sat down and other than jotting down a few notes, been like, I'm watching Midnight Run. And those notes were, of course, on the movie. And it's a different experience. It's a different thing when you really zone to the screen like that, and pay attention to what's going on.
Yes, I agree. And that's part of the experience of going to the movie theater. Part of what makes it so much richer is that you don't have your phones. There is nothing else to distract you but the movie in front of you. And that's really a different level of watching a movie.
Before we get too far in, can you give the audience a little bit of a rundown of what Midnight Run is about? I think most people probably will have seen it, but there may be some who need a refresher.
Of course. So, a quick overview. Charles Grodin plays an accountant who embezzled or stole about $15 million dollars from Dennis Farina's character, who's a mobster, and he is bailed out. He's in jail. He's bailed out by Robert De Niro's employer, who's a bail bondsman. He skips bail, and Robert De Niro is hired to go find him and bring him back. And the hilarity ensues when everything, of course, falls to pieces Charles Grodin does an amazing job. Um, he's annoying. It's like going on a trip with your little brother. He is obviously trying to subvert the mission from the start, because he knows that if he does go back to jail, he'll be killed by one of, Jimmy Serrano's henchmen, or somebody will get to him. And the employer, out of nervousness that things aren't going well, also tasks a second skip tracer to go get Charles Grodin. So you have, and the FBI is also looking for him because he would be a government witness for the mob trial. So the mob is looking for Charles Grodin in order to kill him. The FBI is looking for Charles Grodin in order to put him in witness protection programs. Robert De Niro is looking for Charles Grodin to get his $100,000 bounty that he's agreed with his boss to get. And the other bounty hunter is looking for him for money as well. And it's comically a fraction
but
of
only
the
20.
amount.
Yeah, but only 25,000 because he was not as good at driving a bargain with Joe Pantaleone's bail bondsman character.
Exactly. That's a quick rundown of the movie. I tend to enjoy this type of movie. Robert De Niro is kind of this flawed hero character that, failed marriage, failed job history. He doesn't strike an attractive figure. He's poorly dressed, poorly maintained. He's a chain smoker.
He's got this great coat, but it doesn't quite fit him right.
He's
So
got
even
this,
that is
right, this beautiful leather coat that just kind of hangs on him. And yeah, the movie is just about the relationship he builds with Charles Grodin's character, kind of forced to build by being around each other 24/7 for the week long it takes to get him from New York City to Los Angeles. And, kind of a redemption of his life. They, through the course of the movie, reveal some issues that De Niro had with his previous spouse and with his job, which was also wrapped up with Dennis Farina's mob character. He refused to get on the payroll, and consequently lost his job and was run out of Chicago. And that's why he's a lowly bounty hunter in Los Angeles. It's a very funny movie with, I think, some more serious undertones, and definitely worth your time.
Yeah, well said. What you talk about with the De Niro character, one thing I really love here is that even though this is 88, so we're obviously well into the 80s, there are elements of his character in particular that really reach back to 70s crime movies. That even though this is a comedy, that there is that central grit there of this one good cop.
Well, and it's the one good cop who can't seem to follow the law. I mean, the movie opens with him picking up a fugitive, immediately goes to pick the lock of the door. So, it's not like he gets a warrant or has any rights.
And we don't know that he's a bounty hunter at that point. So I was thinking about that, having seen it so many times, that when you see that opening scene for the first time, if you don't know what the movie is, you're like, oh, this guy's breaking into an apartment.
He's breaking into an apartment, and then it gets even better, because as he's trying to apprehend this guy after the chase goes out into the alley adjacent to the garbage apartment that the guy is in, if this movie came out today, I would be interested to know how it would be received, because they simply do not take any care about things like people's rights or the violence. It's not a violent movie, but there is violence in the movie. Now, I wonder how this movie would be received today. There is that 70s cop, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to do the right thing for the right reasons. but I'm not going to do it right. De Niro just has the look that really works with the shit on your shoes, fuck you, chain smoking, down on your luck guy who isn't noble necessarily, but especially in this movie, he finds a nobility in this one case, but throughout, that, the story about him in Chicago and not wanting to take the bribe that all of his friends had taken, there's a moral compass at the core of the character that he can't seem to shake. That whole freight train scene, the scenes around the freight train were pretty pivotal in that that's the first time you see those characters bond and open up. And it is, you can start to see De Niro is struggling. They're in the diner at one point. There is a scene with Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro when they're on the run. They're in somewhere in New Mexico, you assume, and they're in a little diner, and De Niro, Charles Grodin's asking him, did you read about me in the newspapers? And De Niro says, yes, I did. And Grodin says, well, were you on my side then? And De Niro's like, yes, I was, because who doesn't like to see the mobster asshole get his money stolen by the Robin Hood accountant who ends up giving it to charity.
Especially when you've got your own personal history with that mobster.
Yes,
right?
exactly. This is the same guy who ruined your life. And Charles Grodin's like, well, why aren't you on my side now? And De Niro says, because now you're in my way. I think that plants a seed. I think that there's no way that character got out of that exchange without, at least on some level, starting to ask himself, why am I not on this guy's side now? Where is, what's changed? Okay, there's now money involved. Charles Grodin's character offered him money to let him go. And again, De Niro's not the type of guy to take a payoff. Or I should say Jack Walsh is not the type of guy to take a payoff. But I think that plants the seed. I think that the train was a really good moment of they become friends in a way. They had this exchange where, in the next life, we'll be friends. Kind of, you're all right. Circumstances are going to prevent us from being friends in this life, but I like you as a person, and we would have been friends if not for the fact that, we're in this situation. It's the dynamic of their relationship throughout the whole movie is very interesting. One of my favorite lines from the movie at the very beginning is when De Niro says, I've known you 5 minutes and already I don't like you. And Grodin just goes, that's really too bad. No, that's too bad. I really like you. And, at the end of the movie, it's De Niro's character that literally saves his life. And it's a fun journey to get from one point to the other, I would say.
No doubt about that. One thing I scribbled down last night, the Duke, that being Grodin's character, actually does some very caring, concerned things in terms of Jack from very early on, about his smoking and about what he eats. And do you feel like that's genuine right from the start, or do you feel like he's playing a little bit of a game with him? What do you think?
I think he's doing it to be annoying, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are so many points in the movie where Charles Grodin could have been more proactive in getting away, but it would have come at the cost of Jack's safety or life. And he wasn't willing to do that. He wasn't willing to, at the river, he was not willing to trade his life for Jack Walsh's life. So I think he did it to be a pain in the ass. I love the bus scene when they're on the bus together and it's just constant, why don't you put the cigarette out? Why don't you? And then after that, why aren't you popular with the Chicago Police Department? I mean, like I said, going on a vacation with your little brother, just constantly needling you. But Charles Grodin's character has a fundamental problem of very ingrained morals that prevent him from saving himself at the cost of somebody else, in this case, De Niro.
That's true. I mean, there's a lot of places where he could have just gone limp to make it difficult to move in places and that sort of thing. But I don't think this movie cares about character logic as much as it cares about character emotion. So I think like we see them making emotional choices that make sense to us on a human level,
Mm-hmm.
even if we stopped and broke it down, and said maybe that wasn't logical. And by the way, that's something I only think about after having seen it 35 times. I'd be surprised if many people on first viewing are like, "Oh, this doesn't make sense."
Yes, absolutely. The complete 180 of the Duke stealing the plane or trying to steal the plane at the Indian reservation after telling De Niro that he's afraid of flying. He's an actual pilot, and the fear of flying is kind of what sets off the whole movie. They first
These
try
things
to
go
take it.
down. These things go down.
I know, it's a great scene, and De Niro and him are, De Niro's obviously enraged at the whole thing. Within a matter of hours, and in the, I assume very shortly after that scene, um, De Niro uncuffs him and gives him an FBI badge so that they can go into the bar, and he does it without even knowing the plan. Grodin's just like, I'll take care of it, and it
So
struck
so let
me.
me ask you to pause there. And I guess I'll spoil my end first since you just mentioned it. For me, that is the single funniest scene in the movie. I'm wondering, what is your favorite scene, or if you need to pick a couple, like what do you think the fun, like as far as humor, what are the funniest scenes?
Oh my god, that is probably the funniest scene in the movie. I loved that entire scene. Grodin just, I mean, nails it, doesn't even do it justice. The way they play off of each other, De Niro and Grodin both throughout that scene, is just perfect. All the way down to the hillbillies at the bar. The casting director for this movie should have gotten the Nobel Prize. Um, and really, I know that we've talked about this before, seeing a movie and you're like, oh, nobody could have done that better than that actor. Well, that's just because you just saw the actor do that.
Yeah, yeah, but this
I,
one,
I, the more I think about it and the more I watch with awareness, which I think is what your project has gotten me to start thinking about, the value of the cast and who, like, picking the right actor is just, it's the whole movie. And I know that I've been thinking about this because of our texts that we go back and forth, and y'all talk about, we talk about movies quite a bit. But that scene with Grodin pretending to be an FBI agent looking for a counterfeiter passing $20 bills. And did you notice they take, like, all of them? I mean,
all but two, I think. I think he leaves
yes,
two.
it's like, holy cow, like, really? That's these are all bad. These are good. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Oh
So
my
that may
goodness.
have always been my favorite scene, but I will tell you, preparing for this, where it really struck me, there were two things that struck me here about us talking about this in particular. First of all, not exactly for money, but that's very much the kind of scam you and I love to pull in our early 20s. Like we're pulling it on friends, but just acting like we have this knowledge that the other person doesn't and seeing how well we can bluff our way through it. I don't think we ever said litmus configuration, but we were definitely along those lines at times.
Yes. There's a lot of, there was definitely some symmetry, and you and I would have played that part well.
Now
Um
here was the thing that I was kind of sad to realize watching it last night. You're Jack and I'm the Duke. And as much as I think Jack's cooler and I'd like to be Jack, I mean, I just think in our relationship that's how it breaks down.
well, you and to that scene, you would be the brains of the operation on that one. And how clever with you take two steps back, you don't touch it, you open, and it was like This is just masterful. Definitely as far as funny goes. I love Dennis Farina. There's not much that he's in that I can't enjoy. He's not very prominent in the movie, actually.
Which it's so important that he's so big and memorable, big, like, personality-wise, because there isn't much of him, and that character could get lost in an unfortunate way.
I didn't appreciate how little he was in the movie until I watched it yesterday, and I'm like, man, we are halfway through this movie. You get pretty far into the movie before he even makes an appearance. And yeah, he's in the movie for a grand total of 10 minutes. But he is a pivotal part, and some of his scenes, the scene in the limo with Grodin at the end, that's a powerful scene. That really, for a movie that's you've been laughing at for the last hour and a half, you get to that scene, and that is a sobering scene. When he says, "You're going to die tonight," and then he says, "I'm going to go home and eat a hot meal, and I'm going to find your wife and kill her too." Oh shit, this is a bad guy. This is much more serious than two jackasses running around the country playing Keystone Cops and having antics follow them around. I think Farina was, rest in peace, just amazing.
Well, one thing I'll mention quickly, you may know this already, but I'll mention it for the audience because it's one of my favorite actor backgrounds. Dennis Farina was a Chicago cop for 18 years. He got interested in theater and, like, did a play at Steppenwolf Theater, famous Chicago theater company. Michael Mann hired him as a police consultant on Thief, ended up putting him in the movie, and then the guy becomes like a supporting actor movie star over the rest of his life, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think Crime Story was one of his first big roles.
And that was Michael Mann. Yeah, that was huge.
That's
Um,
funny that he was a cop. I could see, I mean, I can definitely see it.
so, you mentioned how much the two stars are in it, which I think is key to that relationship growing the way it does. But I also think that puts more of a burden even on these supporting roles. There's a lot of characters in this movie, right? And so with
Oh yeah.
relatively limited screen time each, they have to really get a lot across. Who are the supporting performances that stand out to you the most in this?
You know, Marvin Dorflin, who's the competing bounty hunter, is the most present in the movie aside from the main characters. And he does a great job. Yaphet Kotto, who plays the FBI guy. He's in the movie for a blink. At the beginning, you see him when he talks to De Niro, and he's there at the end in the airport, and he's
It's
in
very
there.
it's very parallel to Farina, I would say.
Yeah,
That maybe has,
that maybe
like
two
3 to
scenes
4
of
meaningful scenes until the final sequence where they both get more time.
right, and other than that, it's just these less than 1 minute clips with them in it of keeping them up. But he just does it perfectly. But everybody, all the supporting characters in that movie, even the guy who plays Joey, the idiot mobster guy, um, one of the things that makes this movie work is that everybody just nails their part. And Eddie, who's Joe Pantaleone, he has a very minor part. Again, he's in the beginning, and then you see him on phone calls throughout the movie. He's great.
So good, and you're right, like, a role where you're principally on the phone can be so easy to be anonymous, and he's mostly functional, right? Like, it's mostly to kind of fill in plot and give us exposition, but he brings so much personality to it that it doesn't feel that way. It feels like a real character.
Absolutely. And, him and Yaphet Kotto, and really anybody could have phoned it in and the movie still would have worked. You didn't need an amazing acting job by either of those two guys for this movie to still be my favorite movie. But it was just, and that's true of many characters in that movie, and they all just nailed it. I wonder, even if it's not a conscious thing that you think about when you watch a movie, you can tell which actors I think are really giving it their A game and which actors are either just not as good or didn't get their cup of coffee that week or something, it detracts from a movie. A great movie can really get hurt by a single bad supporting actor. And this movie dodged that bullet perfectly. I mean, you know, the whole movie was executed so well, and I'm glad because I would hate for this story to get lost with bad acting. But even the kid who answered the door,
I
but
love when he slams the door and Charles Grodin goes, "Sweet kid."
yeah, he don't look much like a
Oh,
criminal. I'm a white collar criminal.
I find that scene so touching into Nero's response to her. And even like with her trying to give him the money, that moment of he almost takes it. You know, he says no, and then he almost takes it for a second. And then he says, no, no, I can't let this be my daughter's memory of me, that I'm
Yep.
taking her piggy bank and leaving, and who knows if or when I'm ever seeing her again.
But when I thought for a minute he might have taken it, like that did kind of ruin it for me. I was like, oh God, no, not after all these years. But yeah, he needed the money desperately. He needed every penny he could get. And I'm sure that he could have taken it and been like, I'll pay you back. But it was like you said, that's not going to be the last memory or the first memory of my daughter, who I haven't seen in 9 years, isn't going to be her loaning me the $180 she made babysitting.
It's interesting to me you said that way because I was thinking of it as last memory, but you're absolutely right. If it was 9 years ago, she has no conscious memory of this man. So
Yeah.
that is effectively their one meeting in her lifetime, and, I certainly
He's-
hope I would like to think highly enough of Jack that he does something to repair that in the future, but we don't know.
I, I think that he does. I think that, if there was a Midnight Run 2, it would be him getting his life together and on track and reconnecting with his daughter. But at the same time, he is moving on. Yeah, I think that is also kind of what you want for the character. Your ex-wife is not coming back. They're married to another cop and blah, blah, blah. It was definitely just another example of the character the character is good, despite all the things he does that are bad. And the reason he's there is because he's wanted by the FBI. And, you know, he's obviously out of ideas if he's going to his ex-wife to borrow money. And then he gets in a fight with his wife immediately and starts insulting her and her husband and her marriage. And,
He can't help himself. Like, he can't he's got so much bitterness still that he goes there right away.
he goes there right away. He's acting like a complete jerk. The last way you would expect somebody to act who needs a giant favor.
Right.
And his daughter pops in, and how old was she? 16 in the movie?
I read her as younger than that. I read her as more around 13.
But like you said, her previous memory, if she has any at all, she's extremely young.
Yeah.
So this is her first time meeting him, and doesn't start off great, but yeah, he's got a line that he can't cross, and that line is both taking a payoff from a crooked mobster guy and apparently money from your estranged daughter.
There's another thing that happens in that scene that is the smallest moment that just really hits some of the things you were talking about before. When he's putting Charles Grodin back in the passenger seat, his
Oh,
trench coat
yeah.
hangs down, and he just takes it and, like, I think the only word I can use for it is gently, like, kind of gently lifts it and puts it back in the car so it doesn't get stuck in the door, and there's just something beautiful about that to me.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That, and not just recently when I watched it, that stuck with me the first time I watched it. And that was this very human act of kindness or consideration, I would say, that up until that point in the movie would have just been unthinkable. You wonder how much of it is the result of Was he humbled by his wife? Because he does it before his daughter runs out with the money.
Yes.
So it has nothing to do with that. I'm assuming that that wasn't scripted. It was just something that that character should have done or would have done. I don't know what makes him do it, but it's a touching moment in the movie. It changes the way you look at his character for the rest of the movie. And it's such a small thing, but it does resonate when, you know, they're on the train, they bond on the train. But that scene with the code was absolutely a game changer for how I looked at Robert De Niro's character.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. The other thing I thought about with it is the Duke's encouraging him to go see his family when they're in Chicago, even before it becomes almost necessary.
Right.
And it's one of those things, when we were talking about how genuine is he being with Jack, like maybe he's seeing that as an opportunity to encourage him, but also genuinely wants to encourage him to do that. His own wife seems important to him, and that it maybe means something to him, even at a time he's not wild about Jack, to say, hey, see your goddamn family,
Yeah. And to your point, I say, oh, I think he's just doing it to needle him or mess with him. There's plenty of things he could mention to do that. He doesn't have to talk about his health or his smoking or his eating or, in this case, his family. I think that you'd be a better person if we have a few hours when we're in Chicago. I think you'd be a better person if you went and saw them. I think that was more genuine. He could have said any number of things to bother De Niro's character. I think that was more genuine than the eating and smoking thing.
So I feel like we've kind of touched on this, but something I really wanted to ask you is, how does this movie juggle the various things it is so well? Like, it's over the top action, it's comedy that is very character based, but even veers into the silly sometimes. But then it also has this real emotional heart we've talked so much about. I don't know that I have an answer to this, by the way, but I'm just interested in any thoughts, stray or otherwise, you might have about how and why that works in this one.
You know, first it works with the actors, obviously. It takes the right actor and obviously good writing. The movie is written in such a way that it works as many things. I think I would call it a comedy. Would you call it a comedy? I mean, if you were to put it on a shelf in a video store for people that know what those are, where would you put this?
I'm putting it in comedy. I mean, there's obviously an argument for action. I think drama would be a tough sell as much as it has great dramatic elements, but I think I'd put it in comedy at its core.
Yeah. So it it sticks to that as its anchor. It's at its core a comedy that touches on other things, I think. If it tried to do more drama than it did, I do not think it would have worked. They managed to put in just the right amount or as much as they could without making it weird. Let's talk about the action scenes. There's them in the truck that he hotwires when they're being chased by the police and the
I mean,
helicopter.
that scene for me is just amazing. Like,
I
it
love
it
that scene.
sh-
Oh my
shades
God.
shades of the Blues Brothers big chase in that one for me. Yeah, just terrific comic action there.
That and then De Niro's line when you see him say, I've come too far, I've gone too far, you're like, he's basically risking both of their lives. And he's saying, I'm all in, which at this point in the movie, you've probably figured out since, everybody's risked life and limb to get their hands on this guy. It had just the right amount of action to keep it fun. It had just the right amount of drama for you to understand that it's not just a comedy, but it was all tied together or held together by the comic thread. And Charles Grodin, he plays the straight man. He's so perfect for this role. And I love De Niro, don't get me wrong. I think Charles Grodin might be one of the most underappreciated, awesome actors of our generation in that, God, he was so perfect for this role. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
even know what to say.
it you know, you mentioned the idea earlier of it's very easy to say that somebody is perfect for a role because you didn't see anybody else in it. I can't imagine anybody but Grodin pulling this off. Like, there's just a dry wit there, and he's not a guy who a lot by choice because he did his talk show and he was really interested in issues. He's not a guy who had a huge career of a lot of great movies.
No.
Um, uh,
Beethoven.
y-
I mean, God.
have you seen The Heartbreak Kid?
No.
I think you'd really like that one. It's an early Grodin comedy, but you know what I'm thinking about in contrast to what you're saying. So Martin Brest, who directed this, also directed Beverly Hills Cop, and I love Beverly Hills Cop. Don't get me wrong, but I think Beverly Hills Cop struggles with these balance issues that this movie pulls off so well. Like,
That's a
how
good
much do you
example.
care? How much do you care about the central plot of Beverly Hills Cop? I know I really don't.
No. And you don't care about the characters. You past they're funny. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I think there's a nice little relationship between Eddie Murphy and the 3 cops, including the lieutenant, but it's funny comic interplay. You don't get the emotional depth that you find in
Yeah.
this movie. You don't watch Beverly Hills Cop and think of Eddie Murphy that way. First of all, you don't think you could possibly be as funny as Eddie Murphy, but that's also because it's really just a pure comedy, whereas,
Right.
Jack's a
Right.
real character. Like, he has his funny lines,
Right.
you know and you know what hit me? You referred to Charles Grodin as a straight man. I had never thought about this before, but part of the weird dynamic here is they're both kind of straight men in a way,
Yeah,
but
actually,
both
that's
get a lot of
true.
funny lines, you know?
Yeah, now that you mention it, straight man implies that there was a not straight man would really no. They were all straight.
I mean, if anything, like, I think maybe if you said classic comedy, like, De Niro's more the straight man here because Grodin gets more of the funny lines, but they're not like an Abbott and Costello where it's extreme at all. It's because it's grounded characters, it's people you believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that I think about it, another funny scene when they're arguing with each other in the truck about who lied to who first. And Graham's like, "Yes, I lied to you first, but you didn't know I was lying. So as far as you know," and I'm just like, "Oh my God, these people. I mean,
Ugh.
yeah, they should be married." The movie really does an amazing job tying in just the right amount of drama and gravity to make you care.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have just been a very funny movie with very good actors.
Is there
Okay.
anything big you feel like we left out that was like in your notes? We have to talk about this.
I think one thing I appreciated was the airport scene at the end, how the music, it's like a tea kettle getting louder.
Yeah.
They have that sort of instrumental in the background. The acting is obviously great, but they do such a good job building that scene and getting you nervous. And then the microphone goes dead for the wiretap. And Yaphet Kotto's character, Alonzo Mosley, is looking at this through binoculars, trying to figure out what's happening. And I'm kind of in my seat like, he's got the discs. Come on, what are y'all waiting for? This and that. And there's the guys with the guns, and then Marvin's there. And I was just, what a great ending to this movie. Well, and the end, which is him giving him his watch and Charles Grodin giving him several $100,000 in cash, which he had with him
Like
the
you do.
entire time. Um, I thought that was just masterful. The airport scene was just perfectly timed, perfectly played, and again, not overboard.
I'm just thinking of it. I love heading into that scene where Jack's got this big smile and they ask him, "What are you smiling about?" And he says, "I love being a cop again." It's his passion. So let me ask you, for fans of this movie or people who watch this movie because they listen to this episode, what are some other movies you think they might like checking out?
You know, for you're not going to find its equal, but again, I think that somebody that enjoyed this movie would enjoy Die Hard 2, would enjoy The Last Boy Scout, um, and I think that it would do them justice or do them well to dig back into some of the 70s and 80s classic cop movies. Um, there's something that this movie is kind of it resonates as the last vestige of some of the 70s and 80s that are gone. What do you think?
I have a few that I thought of that maybe aren't as direct of comps, but I think people would enjoy if they like this. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles came to mind.
There
More of a
is that
goofy comedy,
aspect.
but there's that travel together and opposites learning that they care about each other as they go.
That's a
Um, on
great that's a great one.
on the crime end, it's funny because, like I said, Beverly Hills Cop is the same director, but 48 Hours is actually the Eddie Murphy movie that I thought of that might be more akin to this.
Yeah,
Uh, and then one final one, because of De Niro, Jackie Brown struck me as a movie where De Niro's maybe closest to in this mode, like kind of a sad sack De Niro performance.
yeah, golly, I forgot about Jackie Brown.
Chief, thank you so much for your time on this one. And look, I feel like there's only one way to end this episode, and that is to say, looks like I'm walking.
Looks like I'm walking. That's right. Perfect.
That's it for our own mid-afternoon run. I'm Brad Glazer. I host, produce, and edit the show. Julia Mott is our social media manager. The music you heard at the beginning of the show and are hearing now is by my friend Richard Bates and his band, The Huns, from their great album, To Skyward. You can find The Huns music on Bandcamp. We'll throw up a link. Please follow, rate, review, subscribe. You know, all the things. You can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Your Favorite Flick, on Letterboxd at Favorite Flick, or shoot us an email at yourfavoriteflick@gmail.com. Huns, take us out.
She spent those 2 weeks cuddling up with the sun. If I spend my day